All right. For the record, we're recording now. You guys are okay being video recorded?
Yep.
Okay.
Begin. We affirm. Contention 1 is inherency. NASA funding is low now. The 2014 NASA budget was $17 billion. This is a very small amount of money. It forced them to cancel their Constellation program, which is what they were going to use to get people to space and get people to the moon. Currently, we have to rely on the Russians to get anything larger than like a small satellite to space. It's currently like 0.5% of the federal budget. NASA funding right now is too low for them to do anything of significance beyond like low Earth orbit. And second, there's no political will to do this plan now. It's election season, and the Republicans are like, going into what can we cut mode, and then the first thing that's on their list is NASA. So there's no way that this plan would ever happen, there's no way this resolution would ever happen in the status quo. Thus, the plan. The United States federal government will immediately establish a program to create a permanent human colony on Mars by 2040. This is going to be paid for by normal ways and means, and as specified in the resolution, it's going to take place immediately. Point on solvency. We have two solvency advocates. First one is Elon Musk. Elon Musk says that it is possible. Go ahead.
What's your funding approximation?
The approximation of how much it's going to cost.
Yeah, how much
it's probably going to cost about on a year-to-year basis. The NASA budget's probably going to have to go up by a factor of about 4.
So yeah, it's like $80 billion total per year.
Yeah, something around there. Well, yeah. So yeah, we have two solvency advocates. First is Elon Musk. He says it's possible because the technology already exists. He says it's possible we could do it within 10 years. The technology already exists. Basically, it's just that the resource commitment is necessary. There's a guy named Zebrin who has a PhD in quantum mechanics from MIT who says the technology already exists. We are ready. We just lack the political will. So this plan could happen. That's according to two people who know quite a bit about space between the two of them, so this plan is solvent and it is possible. Let's go on to our advantage. Contention 2 is STEM jobs. So basically the link here, going to Mars revitalizes interest in STEM. Right now there is low interest in STEM jobs. This is according to the Office of the Chief Economist of the United States. Right now there's like a lack of STEM jobs. Employers are noticing that they don't have enough people to fill these STEM jobs. In the last 10 years there's been like a growth by a factor of 3 in STEM jobs. Compared to the growth in non-STEM jobs. Businesses are concerned that they can't find enough people to fill these STEM jobs, and it's projected to grow another 18% by the year 2018. So what happens here is that going to Mars, starting a project to go to Mars basically revitalizes interest in people having STEM jobs. The warrant here is, look at the 1960s when President Kennedy went to Rice University and he said, we go to the moon not because it's easy but because it's hard. This basically created an interest because the Apollo project was probably the largest feat of human engineering that has ever been accomplished. This created an interest in the United States in STEM jobs, and people were like growing up wanting to be scientists. Then we stopped going to the moon, and that stopped happening. The same thing is going to happen here. We're going to be basically embarking on a massive engineering project. The United States is going to be leading the way in this engineering project, and so it's going to be inspiring people to go out and train themselves and go to college and become engineers. That's what we need to survive in the future because, again, we don't have these jobs, and this is how the United States is basically going to outsmart the rest of the world. This is how the United States is going to outsmart the rest of the world and be prepared for the future so that we can win the future. That's the impact here, is that we're going to have more educated people. We're going to have more educated people, which means we're just going to be able to continue along our course of technological advancement, which is something that we're not having right now because there's not a huge interest in STEM jobs in the United States, but there is in other countries. So in order for the United States to maintain its competitiveness, there's going to be, basically we need all of these STEM jobs, and the only way that's going to happen is through the affirmative. Let's go on to contention 3, which is residual technology. So basically the uniqueness here is that NASA funding is very, very low now in real terms. NASA funding has historically been low except for the Apollo program. But when we had the Apollo program, we had scientists working on things and then they came up with all of these other kinds of technologies. I'm just going to go down the list. Things invented by NASA. Smoke detectors were invented by NASA. Personal computers, which many of you have in this room, were invented by NASA. Telecommunications, massively improved by NASA. Water filtration, invented by NASA. Better computer software, better athletic shoes, if that matters to you. Freeze drying was invented by NASA. Solar power, invented by NASA. Some massive advances in the field of physical medicine, and things like liquid metal and infrared scanning, all invented by NASA, just like and Teflon, if that's something you care about, all invented by NASA just in the course of them trying to in the course of them trying to do other things, in the course of them trying to go to the moon with the Apollo program, they ended up inventing all of these other things. And so that's what happens. But right now, NASA funding is too low. They can't do anything. As I said, they had to scrap their Constellation project. They're not doing anything new. They're not doing anything that's going to enable their scientists to invent all of these wonderful things. So what we see here is that if we increase funding to NASA, we're going to have more of these residual technologies, and this is linear. The more money we spend, this impact is linear. The more money we spend, the more residual technologies we come up with, and the better it is for everyone. Let's go on to contention 4, which is extinction. So basically, extinction is likely in the status quo. In 1972, MIT scientists basically wrote a model. Basically, they wrote a paper and did a study explaining why the world collapse is sort of inevitable in the 21st century. And so basically, they were talking about things like peak oil, resource shortages. We're running out of a lot of important running out of a lot of important resources that just won't come back because they're heavy metals. You can't create those in a lab without expending other heavy metals. So, basically what we see here is that this model is currently working. This model is currently on track. The model that they created 43 years later is still on. It's basically, the model is spot on. So what we see here is that we are on track for a collapse and an extinction level scenario happening inside the 21st century. However, go ahead.
Wait, what would cause the extinction specifically?
Okay, so basically it goes to the fact that we have nothing anymore. So it goes to resource wars. So it goes to essentially resource wars, which leads to a nuclear war, which is the main part of your extinction scenario. Go ahead.
Okay, so that means that when we colonize Mars, would we get access to all of these new resources from Mars?
No. What it's saying is that when this extinction scenario happens, we're going to have a colony on Mars, which is going to be able to save the human race. This is basically, it's going to be a permanent human colony. So it's going to be a self-sustaining, sustainable human colony. So yeah, that's what's going on here. So basically, the Mars colony is necessary to prevent the extinction, because otherwise, if we all are stuck on Earth, and we can look to I think it was Carl Sagan who said, no, this is, the guy who wrote Space Odyssey, who said that the reason the dinosaurs aren't alive is because they don't have a space program. Extinction is the end of all human consciousness. It's irreversible, it's got massive magnitude, and the plan solves for that because we're going to have a colony on Mars that prevents us all dying in an extinction level event on Earth. That's what we affirm. Using normal passive times, right? 7 minutes for one.
Yeah.
Is this good?
Yeah.
Let's see.
Just probably 1 off or 2 off, and then cross apply to on. And so for off case, you probably need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces of paper, depending on how big you are. Okay, and yellow clear if it's too fast. Probably won't be too fast. Everyone ready?
Yep.
Starting time now. A, framework. 1, roll the ballots to evaluate the best ethical framework in meeting the space other. K is a priori. Reason to this. 1, framework equals the methodology as well as the rhetoric that we use in the round. The importance, and basically the ethical sphere that we use in the round. The importance in any sphere of life is defined by ethics. Ethical inquiry is literally the most important thing in the world. Ethics is a mean of judgment. It permeates through every decision that any human makes. Thus, a flawed ethical framework leads to flawed, ethically bankrupt policy, meaning if we prove that their ethical framework is bad, turn all of their impacts against them because it's under a flawed ethical framework, meaning the policy is inherently bad. Okay, second, fiat is illusory. The affirmation has actually 0 chance for this plan to actually happen. United States federal government, a delegate from the United States federal government isn't in this room wondering whether or not they should be passing this plan. Thus, the plan doesn't actually happen. So what we have to look at is real-world impacts, and only we access the real-world impacts. We change the mindsets of the people in the room if we're able to, through our critique. Additionally, role-playing is bad. Role-playing basically desensitizes these young debaters to all of these things. They talk about human extinction, but what does human extinction really mean? Can we really fathom the death of every single human that we know? They're just throwing it out there as another calculable impact. So we can see the role-playing is bad for that reasoning up. Okay, going on, voting of a flawed ethical framework legitimizes that team. So, sorry, this is the third point. So basically, vote for us if you believe they have a flawed ethical framework, simply because by voting them, their ethical framework up more and more, you're allowing them to go to further and further rounds to proliferate this bad ethical framework. and this team will carry their ethical framework throughout their life. Okay, fourth is that perm fails. According to Calicut, a moral system that flip-flops on its values and destroys values is morally flawed. Ethical eclecticism is rationally intolerable and morally suspect. It invites suspicion and ad hoc rationalization for merely expedient or self-serving action. Flip-flopping on ethical views makes them meaningless. Theirs is problematic, so we can't do both. Okay, thesis. The affirmation is rooted in anthropocentrism. They posit nature and the space as a possible resource to spread ideology of human-centered values. Their discourse and methodology place human needs and desires above at the center of the universe. Links. 1. The affirmation views Mars as a place for humans to develop their anthropocentric views of humanity at the center of the universe. According to Robert Frodeman at the University of North Texas, there's no consensus in the space community to look at nature and look at the environment as intrinsic value or as having intrinsic value or having value dependent on what humans put on it. Some things on Earth, some things humans actually have intrinsic value, but this doesn't cross-apply to space. What that means is that a lot of people don't look at space and look at Mars, for example, as having this intrinsic value. Yeah.
So we're talking about intrinsic value. Are we talking about objective value, like something has value,
like
even
grass,
if no one thinks it has value?
Like basically, an animal has, an animal has inherent right to life, just like a human has inherent right to life. The environment has inherent right to its own geological integrity as well as environmental integrity, just like a human has the right to their own environmental integrity. Yeah.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
That's the mindset we're attacking. It should. That's the point we're trying to make, and we're going to impact out to why, if we don't think like that, it's bad. Okay, so there's no consensus to look at. So some things on Earth, yeah, again, so the United Nations, and so this doesn't cross apply to space, meaning a lot of things that we look at in space, we don't look at as having intrinsic value. For example, the United Nations and NASA put human needs before everything else. We still dump hundreds of thousands of tons of garbage and space debris into the Earth's orbit every single year. We're ruining the geological integrity of space. We're literally treating space as another dumping ground for human waste. And a lot of the policies that are in place for space don't say what will happen if humans encounter extraterrestrial life. We don't say whose needs will overcome the other person's needs. We don't specify whether our needs will overcome their needs will overcome our needs, or it will be equal. So essentially, what we can see is that there's the mindset of anthropocentrism because evidence dictates that we would rather put our needs above their needs. In their plan, they're putting the needs of humans, they're putting the need to colonize new humans, to basically exploit Mars for human extinction, for human survival, above the needs of Mars' own geological integrity, above the right to Mars to have its own intrinsic, basically, right to be left alone. Okay, humans still look to space as a way to get a mineral. And the thing is that we still look at space in the status quo and under their plan. There's still this mindset to look to space as a way to get minerals, as a way to exploit resources. We look at Mars to get economic benefits, to stop our own survival. We look at the science benefits, the STEM benefits of colonizing Mars, rather than looking at Mars as having its own intrinsic value. In addition to that, we still look at mining asteroids and things like that. We look at space as another dumping ground. We look at space, and under their plan, this anthropocentric mindset, we look at space as a way to benefit humans. So link 2, the nature of wanting to colonize Mars is inherently anthropocentric, and this goes back to basically the rhetoric of space policy making equals there's basically exploitation and colonization leads to private property claims and resource exploitation. The reason for this is that when we go to colonize Mars, because we're going to be taking our anthropocentric capitalistic mindset with us, thus humans are inevitably going to say, this part of Mars is mine, that part of Mars is mine, that part of Mars is mine. And what's going to happen here is that now when we feel like we own part of the land, it's going to allow us and justify us to mine minerals, to destroy the geological integrity of these places. We're going to destroy the polar ice caps of Mars to get water for our own survival maybe. We're going to mine massive mountains to get iron or core or other things that we deem necessary for humans. We're going to be ruining the geological integrity of Mars. So impacts of the anthropocentric mindset. 1, anthropocentrism destroys all life. For example, it's destroyed all environmental destruction that's ever happened. Loggers who destroy vast swaths of the Amazon say that we need our profits, we need our food before we have to think about the environmental integrity. American settlers, when they're going on their manifest destiny path across America, they destroyed vast swaths of American heartland, cut down hundreds of thousands of tons of trees. So the mindset of anthropocentrism will inevitably lead to a massive increase in development both on Mars as well as on Earth. And what happens with this mindset is, sorry, I have a lot to get through, maybe at the end. What happens is that eventually we're going to be cutting down mass swaths of trees, all environmental destruction, all death of life, simply because as we continue to fuel this, I don't have time, because as we continue to have this massive anthropocentric mindset, we'll increase development, and we're right now on the brink of a 6th mass extinction. As we continue to develop more and more, as we continue to put our needs before nature's, we're essentially going to be killing more and more organisms, killing more and more environments, which will inevitably lead to a 6th mass extinction. And when that 6th mass extinction happens, it's going to kill all ocean life, simply because once the mass extinction happens, there'll be a massive amount of environmental destruction, which will inevitably kill humans, simply because we're not going to have enough food, or we're not going to have enough human words. Okay, so going on to the alt. Alt is to adopt a deep ethical, to reject the affirmation and adopt an ethical framework of deep ecology. Solvency 1. Anthropocentrism is based on a flawed epistemology that.
Sorry, read the alt real quick.
Huh?
Read the alt again.
Alt, reject the aff and adopt an ethical framework of deep ecology. Solvency, anthropocentrism is based on a flawed epistemology that fails to question humanity's relationship with the environment. Only deep ecology can provide a framework change. Adopting a deep eco framework and policy-making forces to look at nature and environment as having their own inherent value. Under deep ecology, the well-being of environments, both biotic and abiotic, have intrinsic value. Thus, when we look at environments, we're going to look at them for their own intrinsic value. So when policymakers take upon this ethical framework, they're not going to want to destroy the environment because they're going to develop a me-you relationship instead of a me-it relationship with the environment. So when this happens, when we view the environment as having its own intrinsic value, we're not going to want to destroy it. Thus, we solve for all the harms and all the impacts of total and utter environmental destruction. Please vote nay. Thank you.
So we've heard that. It's going to be critique framework.
Excuse me just 1 second.
Yeah.
So I can understand
Do you not write down?
What's the order?
Judges ready?
Yeah, what's the order though?
Oh, the order is going to be basically critique framework, and then we're going to perm, and then tackle their alt. And then, like, just like standard.
These all.
Yeah. Okay, opponents ready? Judges ready? I'll begin my time. Now, so our opponents brought up a K and in refutation to the framework. First, we need to prefer a framework. The government has the obligation of providing a plan, and therefore, if the negation can bring up whatever framework they want, then the affirmation loses every single time, because then the negation can make the framework so that the affirmation plan will never be able to win. Now, obviously, this is degenerate to clash. This is degenerate to education, and it destroys the ground for debate. Because if the app loses every single time, then there's no point in debating at all. So we need to perform a framework. The role of the ballot here is to choose a world between one with a plan and one without. One, for example, with a counter plan or a status quo that the negation must bring up. However, they have instead decided to bring up a K. And basically, they talk about how fiat is illusion. First of all, fiat is not an illusion. The room for discourse, the room for debate in here leads to reality. And our opponents talk about how we're not policymakers, how the USFG doesn't care what we're doing in here. The fact is that people like us end up growing into policymakers. And the fact that our opponents are trying to destroy this by basically saying none of this matters will mean that we won't be able to create any more policies, and we'll just be stuck with this, with basically people talking about problems and never creating solutions. Yes?
Can you cite a single policymaker that you know who did parliamentary debate in high school?
No, I cannot, but basically, if you take a look at the number of people who have done debate, for example, John F. Kennedy did debate, and maybe it's not necessarily parliamentary debate, but it's debate nonetheless, and it's a lot more than just talking about problems without providing solutions. And I'll talk about your app in a moment. Also, so basically, next, okay, so going to the perm. First of all, perm. We can do the alternative and the plan at the same time. And the reason why we can solve this is because, yes, we can have NASA go and fund for this Mars colony while we rethink our view on anthropocentrism. Yes, it's not necessary. We never talked about, our opponent's critique basically talks about how we're going to go in and mine asteroids and mine Mars and mine it until it's as barren as the Earth is getting right now. The problem is there's absolutely no link in there. First of all, there's nowhere in our plan that says we are going to go and mine Mars to a barren rock. There's nothing that says we're going to dump piles of space junk even more than what we are doing right now. There's no like that we're going to totally destroy space and totally destroy Mars in it. They have absolutely no link there. Second, extinction first. We need to take a look at extinction first because of magnitude, time frame, and irreversibility. There's no way the human race can come back after extinction happens. Extinction can happen instantaneously with the detonation of a nuclear weapon. That can happen instantaneously. The magnitude. Obviously, extinction is the greatest magnitude that can possibly happen. The elimination of the human race is the greatest thing that can possibly happen. Our extinction argument, it also applies to animals because in nuclear war, humans aren't the only things that get totally destroyed. Yes?
Isn't extinction post-fiat impact though?
Okay, well, see, look, the problem with post-fiat and pre-fiat is that, so post-fiat is what happens in the world after this debate round ends. The problem is, if we just consider what's happening in pre-fiat, if we don't consider what's happening, pre-fiat gets taken out by our framework because if we just consider their framework, then the app loses every single time. If we take a look at post-fiat, we can see that we actually have real-world impacts. All of their impacts are like, okay, well, if we rethink our idea about anthropocentrism, and then everything's going to be fine. The problem is, okay, going back to my perm. If we do the alt and the perm at the same, we can have both of these things at the same time. And the reason why this can solve is because yes, we can both go to Mars, and there's absolutely no link that we're going to destroy Mars. So yes, we can rethink our anthropocentrism. Second is alt. Do the plan and do the alt in all other instances except for the plan. We can see that in previous cases of debate, and people have brought up anthropocentrism time and time again. However, absolutely nothing has changed. Humans are this case still stands. The reason is because nothing has changed after every single one of their rounds. So what makes the negation think that just by bringing up anthropocentrism one more time that they can do anything to change this situation? And second of all, if they can't, then what's the point of voting for the negation? The affirmation actually brings you solution. The negation just brings you something that has been rehashed time and time again and goes absolutely nothing to solve anything whatsoever. Okay, second is bright line. Anthropocentrism is a particular issue because we never talk about what organisms do we need to take into existence to make equal. Like what stands above another. For example, if we limit it to the animal kingdom, that's obviously impossible to give sponges the same rights as humans. And if we extend it to everything, it's impossible to give bacteria the same rights as humans. And overglossing the fact that extinction applies to not just humans, like plants get vaporized too, bacteria can get vaporized too. We can see that there's absolutely no bright line, and it's in fact contradicting to the negation themselves, because whatever alternative they brings up about how we need to have deep ecology isn't going to give the same amount of rights, or isn't going to treat all organisms at the same equal level. It's impossible to do that, and the fact that they're doing that means that it goes against their K in the first place. Okay, now let's take a look at the second perm, the solvency of the reason why that works in a moment, please. The reason is because if the alt works in every single other case, if the alt is so powerful that it will work in every single other case, then there's absolutely no point that we wouldn't want to garner all these impacts that my opponents have failed to talk about, and therefore automatically consider to be true that the plan entails. So therefore, if we have all these positive plans, we prevent the extinction of the human race. We have all these residual technologies. Then we have the alternative in every single other case. Then there's no problem, because then we can have anthropocentrism. We won't have this human dominating all these other organisms, and we will have all these impacts. On the other hand, if the plan if the alternative is sunk by something so easy as the plan, and then there's absolutely no reason to vote for the negation. Yes?
Isn't your rhetoric inherently anthropocentric? Because you literally said that human life should be valued more than...
No, I did not say that human life should be valued more than sponges. I said that it's impossible to have humans and sponges to be at the same level, because it's like you would have to physically implant a brain into them and give them a human organ system in order to be physically, and nothing in the alternative or the plan provides for that. So what I'm saying is it's impossible to have stuff like sponges and bacteria be on the same level of humans. I'm not saying that it should be the case, but the fact that it physically can, means that the alternative contradicts its own K. So basically, negation contradicts themselves, and also, if we take a look at the perm, it's completely solvent. We have all the impacts of the plan, and then we get rid of this anthropocentric mindset, and then we garner the impacts that both the affirmation and negation have. The problem is, if we do not have that, if the negation's critique and their alternative falls in the face of our insignificant plan, then that means that there's absolutely no reason to vote for the negation in the first place at all, pre-fiat or post-fiat. And oh crap, this thing died. Anyways, how much time?
40 seconds.
Okay.
You can take it.
Okay. So anyways, going back to the role of the ballot, the point of this policy, the point of a policy resolution is to prefer a world in either one with a plan or one with a counterplan or status quo. It's not about something about nebulous discursives where it's like, okay, well, let's talk about problems that are not really relevant to the case right here. And so, even if you do buy into their K framework, we've refuted it by stating how it would be impossible for the affirmation to win any round if we prefer the neg framework. And also, their anthropocentrism, the links in their K don't really matter at all, because we had absolutely nothing that talked about mining on asteroids or completely destroying Mars. And we can see through this perm that either the negation, we have nothing to vote for the negation, or that there would be no harm in having the plan, because it could only garner more impacts. And the fact that our opponents have talked about our plan text or about our case at all means that they automatically consider all of this to be true. So keep that perm in mind when you're voting. Thank you.
My back box. Alright.
Wait, just one thing. How do you guys feel about tag team?
No worries. It's fine. We don't.
A tag team?
Like, if I speak to her during her speech.
As long as it isn't too distracting, I don't really care, but I don't flow anything that comes out of your mouth. So
I'd like to see you do those as a friendly POI, where she acknowledges that you wish to speak, and you can. And this is parliamentary procedure, right? You know, did you also mean to say and take time out of her speech? But I'm not a huge fan of it.
Oh yeah, that's fine. We can just pass notes.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'd rather see you pass notes.
Okay, that's
Alright, so as a brief off-ramp roadmap, it's going to be going over the K in this order. So framework, comparing their counter roll of the ballot to our framework, pointing out drops, going on to perms, and then go down links, impacts, all solvency, and then moving on to app case. I can like signpost as I go. And speed is, like normal speed is fine, right? I won't spread or anything. Yeah. Alright, now let's begin on the framework. Actually, sorry, my timer is not working. There we go. Now let's begin on the framework. Now go first to our roll the ballot, which is that we have to evaluate the best ethical framework in today's debate round. Your opponents provide a counter into which says that because the Gov is obligated to provide a plan, then you essentially can't have this idea of this roll the ballot because they have to have no ground education in that we have a K. Now, Judge, I have two responses. Now, first, this is absolutely untrue. A no vote is an app bound to uphold the resolution through the form of a plan. Our opponents could easily run a critical app. The fact that they choose not to do so completely destroys their point right there. We still access, secondly, my second response, we access more education and more impact throughout a round into both pre-FIA and post-FIA when we have critical discourse. Only we can fundamentally engage our own mindsets and assumptions can we enact real change on the world. At the point where you refuse to criticize your own assumptions, you will always maintain the same power dynamics and structures, and insofar as that's true, it's going to cause more harm. You're only going to have negative education. We provide more positive education by having the fundamental educational purpose of criticizing and assuming your assumptions. Now, because they're not bound up with the resolution, and because of that, let's go on to the framework that they drop on our frameworks. Now go on to the neg flow. Go to framework 1, which is that the roll the ballot is to evaluate the best ethical framework. Our opponents completely drop our reasons for that. Now standard 1 there is that essentially because debate is a matter of pre-FIA versus post-FIA, we are only 4 debaters in 1 room and 2 judges. Insofar as that's true, education is the biggest deal in today's round. We have to look at our best ethical framework because ethics always impacts into policy making. Discourse always impacts into reality. At the moment that's true, a fundamentally flawed ethics will always have fundamentally flawed policy, both pre-FIA and post-FIA. So you can go ahead and turn all the impacts on their post-FIA right there because they have a flawed ethical mindset. At the point where that's true, they can never have a good impact because they can never have good policy. So we went on post-FIA as well, but I'll go over that more later. Now let's go more over drops. I'm busy right now. I'll take one later if I have time. Sorry. Now let's go more over what they drop in framework. Now first off, because ethics defines literally everything, it's the most important thing. They drop that. Furthermore, ethics is a means of judgment. They also drop that. And secondly, they talk about how FIA isn't actually illusory because we're always going to grow up to become policymakers. Judge, even if you buy that some of us are going to become policymakers, it's even more critical than to have a critical discourse because if we are actually going to become policymakers, we're going to have actual policies that impact the entire world. Insofar as that's true, when you have a flawed ethical mindset, you have flawed ethical policies that directly hurts people in the real world. So as policymakers, as debaters, we have to question our mindsets now and have a better mindset. That's what we advocate for. FIA is in fact illusion. They drop that. Now secondly, they drop that only we can access real world impacts like changing the minds of people around. They drop that role playing is bad. It's similar across flow. Out of performance, that's true. You're gonna look to case first. They drop the voting of a flawed ethical mindset, essentially makes that legitimizing and makes more teams have that mindset. And now let's go to perm fails, that's framework C. They drop Calicosh, which is because we have a moral system that has more than one ideology. If we adopt both their anthropocentric and our deep ego, that's fundamentally conflicting. At the point where that's true, you will never have true ethics or morality because you simply can't flip-flop on your ethics. That makes it completely meaningless. That makes that translates always to flawed and bankrupt policy. Extend it across flow, they completely drop it. Now go on to perm. Now, perm 1 is essentially that they can do the alt and the plan at the same time. So they talk about how NASA can colonize Mars and also think about not being anthropocentric. They argue that that's true because the plan never specifies mining or colonizing. After that, we have 2 responses. Now, first off, they completely drop this idea that colonization is essentially inherently a matter of anthropocentrism. When you're going to colonize Mars, it's only inherent and natural. They're going to use it for human beings. We're literally going to have a human colony. Insofar as that's true, your own human needs will always come before that of Mars. That's the entire mindset that they adopt this entire rhetoric of colonizing in the first place. They link. So second response that because they drop that perm fails, they're always completely morally bankrupt. You can't have both a NASA anthropocentric view and our deep ego view because these are fundamentally conflicting. And I will always leave, can you pass it? To flawed ethical policy making. And lastly, our third response to that this idea of making Mars a colony also translates to private property, because colonies are essentially a matter of property. Insofar as that's true, private property is inherent in this idea of exploitation, once again linking more to anthro. Now let's go on to perm 2, how we're going to do the alt in every single other instance. Now to this, we have 4 responses. Basically, the discourse never changes, saying that we can always have this K round after round. Judge that with 2 responses. Now first off, discourse is always keen around. We are only 4 debaters and 2 judges. Insofar as that's true, we do fundamentally change something, even if we don't completely destroy deep anthro right now, as to the point where we change everyone's mindset in today's debate round. That's a real pre-fiat impact. We do indeed change this by making us evaluate the way that we look at the world. That's an impact right there. That's a reason to vote for the K, so we have that educational impact. But secondly, this debate is a one unique debate space. You cannot reject the anthro here and vote on anti-anthro in a single debate instance, because this is the only case right now. All we have right now is today's debate round. There is no other space but this. You cannot reject the outdo and do it every other instance. That's simply not possible. Now, lastly, we're not talking essentially about policy, we're talking about a mindset problem. Insofar as they have a flawed and ethically bankrupt mindset, you simply can't vote for them and do both theirs and ours. So that's inherently wrong and contradictory. But fourthly, they talk about how we need a bright line. We don't need a bright line, because we said that essentially everything is going to be equal. Their own idea that sponges don't have brains and therefore can't be equal is an anthropocentric ideal. Insofar as that's true, literally everything is equal. That's what deep equal advocates for. Because they view sponges as being non-equal, that's just another problem. That's essentially not an argument that's like this. It's also fundamentally flawed. But let's go into their solvency. Essentially, they said that if it's so powerful whenever the world, and they can use their app case in this sense. But judge, to this one, they drop that perm fails. Insofar as that's true, they don't get access to that, because Calcott fundamentally says that if we have a flawed policy now, we're also going to have a flawed mindset later. If you right now try to not do our alt but still do their plan, that's going to cause huge problems in the future, because you essentially have a fundamentally bankrupt policy at the same time as you have deep ego. That's going to lead to moral harms both pre-fiat and post-fiat. Now go on to links. They completely drop links. They send them all across the flow. Go on to impacts. They drop all the impacts. Now you're going to use this to turn their impacts. Now they keep talking about extinction. That's their single biggest post-fiat impact in today's round. But insofar as that's true, what you have to realize is the only anthro can truly solve for extinction. What our ones want to do is go to Mars and have some humans on Mars and essentially leave the Earth to rot and it can become extinct. That's going to have a massive extinction for all plant forms, for all abiotic and biotic form. That extinction, once you have a deep equal mindset, outweighs just avoiding human extinction alone, because literally everything else on Earth besides humans are going to die. JPOI?
Yeah, okay, so can we both agree that extinction is bad? Like,
Sure.
including humans?
Sure, that's a question. Sure, extinction is bad, but because we have deep ego, when more things are going to become extinct, that's even worse. Because it's not just humans at that, but we turn on that. And lastly, we also turn all of their post-fiat impacts because they have a flawed policy. Insofar as that's true, all the impacts are going to be fundamentally flawed. Remember that. Now, extend the out and extend out solvency, essentially because we've changed the mindsets in today's round. We adopt a deep equal framework that's always been testing a better policy and makes exploitation completely impossible. For these reasons, I strongly negate.
Can I see your clothes, actually?
Yeah.
No, I'm good. Give me a second, please. Okay. Everyone ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so just gonna be going voting issues, why you should vote Nick. So starting time now. So the first voting issue will be perm. And I'm gonna be really hitting hard on why their perm doesn't stand. So first of all, like they said, they conceded to framework, meaning you shouldn't buy perm anyways. Because the thing is that what happens is that when you have this flip-flopping mindset, when you're first going anthropocentrism, then you're going to deep ecological framework, you can't do both. Simply because if you do both, like, the policymakers are going to look at their own self-interest. They're going to say, oh, here it's best for me if I use deep eco. Here it's best for me if I use an anthropocentric mindset. Thus, it's not really going to have the same effect, simply because if you have this flip-flopping mindset, it really will have no effect, because literally environmental degradation will happen. These politicians will say, hey, here to kill off the Amazon best fits me to adopt an anthropocentric mindset. In addition, like, yeah, extend all my partner's contentions, and they completely drop this, and this is really, really important, because if we continue to flip-flop, then all our ethics will have no meaning at all. Like, when we make a decision, it'll really, like, it just won't matter. Like, policymakers will just look to their own self-interest all the time. Whereas if we have a set policy, if we have like one set ethical framework, like deep ecology, which is the best one, if we have that set ethical framework, we can essentially, if we have that set ethical framework, then we're going to avoid all this corruption, we're going to avoid all this extra exploitation, we're going to avoid all these bad things. So that's why PERM fails, and they completely drop this, and don't let them respond to it later. Now I'm going to be going on to the second point, which is about fiat, like this entire issue of fiat. So fiat is illusory for multiple different reasons. First of all, they completely dropped what we said, how I talked about how ethics is literally the most important thing in this entire debate, how ethical inquiry literally permeates through every single decision that we make. And because of this, we can see that if ethics is really that important, which they concede to, if ethics is that important, then we have to judge our ethical inquiry before we judge everything else. Because if we have a flawed ethics, and I said, if we have a flawed ethical inquiry, if we prove that they have a flawed ethical mindset, it turns all of their impacts. And they conceded that too. Meaning, if you buy K, you basically buy that we win on post-fiat too, because we turn all of their impacts. And don't let them respond to this later, because I brought it up into my first speech and they didn't, and they completely dropped this. So fiat is illusory. And then they talk, like, even if you don't buy that, even if you believe that fiat matters and that all of us here are going to become the next 4 presidents of the United States, if we have a good ethical mindset, if we go in with an anthropocentric mindset into the Oval Office and we make decisions, we're going to make decisions that basically benefit humans at the cost of the environment. And that just feeds more and more into the impacts which they conceded. Whereas if we have like a better ethical framework, if we believe that the environment has inherent value, if we believe that space and Mars and all those things have inherent right to be and exist, then we'll make much better decisions that benefit everyone and avoid the impacts that we talked about that come with an anthropocentric mindset. So we can see that even if you believe fiat, we're making this debate more educational, making it more fair, and making it basically more applicable to the real world. With that, I'm going to be going on to the third voting issue, which can be basically drop links and impacts, and this is really key. So they keep on talking about how they didn't link, but I explained it pretty clearly, I believe. I talked about how, one, when you have this exploration, you're viewing when you have this exploration, and they conceded this because they dropped it. When you have this exploration, you're basically viewing Mars as a way to avoid human extinction. You're viewing Mars and you're viewing space as another resource, as another basically landscape for humans to exploit. And that's anthropocentric because you're putting human needs before everyone else. And I think the second link links them even further, and they conceded this too, how when you colonize Mars, you're going to establish private property claims. And when you establish private property claims, people are going to believe they own the land. And when people believe that they own the land, they're going to be justified in destroying Mars' environment. They're going to be justified in destroying the polar ice caps for water, for mining iron and copper and things like that. That would ruin the geological integrity of Mars and the inherent right of Mars to exist. And that feeds more and more into anthropocentrism. In addition to that, they conceded all of it, and their rhetoric itself proves how they believe, like how anthropocentric they are. And we talked about how rhetoric is included in evaluating discourse and methodology, because the thing is that the rhetoric, they talked about how we need to view Mars as a haven to avoid human extinction, meaning they're ignoring Mars's inherent right to exist, and they're putting human extinction, they're putting human needs before Mars' right. So we went on there. Impacts are really important because we basically talked about how it's total environmental destruction. They conceded that. I mean, if we continue to have an anthropocentric mindset, we're going to have complete and total, in a pre-fiat world, we're going to have complete and total environmental destruction. They talk about all of their impacts. All of their impacts are on post-fiat level. Now I'm going to be voting, basically, now the both voting issue can be tagline solvency. And the thing is that if you vote us up, they conceded how if we have a deep ecological framework, we're going to save the environment. The only thing they really touched on is how is this going to have any effect. But like we keep on saying, if you vote us up, one, everyone in this room is now going to know about deep ecology. Everyone's going to know how great it is. Everyone's going to know this is the policy that I need. This is the ethical framework which I'm going to make decisions. So if they truly do become policymakers in the future, they'll remember deep ecology and they'll remember this ethical framework, and thus they'll be able to do great things. They'll be able to make policies that benefit this. So we do have solvency on a pre-fiat world. But even if you don't buy that, we win on post-fiat because, like I said in the framework, if they have a flawed ethical framework, all of their impacts turn. And they conceded to this. And this is really key because we've proven, I think, sufficiently through the drop links and drop impacts that they do have a flawed ethical framework. Thus, all their impacts on post-fiat immediately turn to our side, meaning they have a lot of negation. And even if you believe it's even, you should vote neg on even. So for all those reasons and many, many more, I strongly urge neg ballot.
Framework, terms, miscellaneous. So I will speak to the process. Everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
First, extend our role of the ballot is because okay, so we're looking at the judge comparing a world with a plan to a world without the plan or with one unconditional counterplan. You can look to our 1AC evidence, you can look to our 1AC evidence which says that extinction comes first. Extinction comes before ethics. It is the highest priority because it requires us, basically, we are required to exist in order to access any of our ethical frameworks. This is why you're going to be preferring our role of the ballot, because it actually helps us prevent extinction. When we're looking at the role of the ballot in like a post-fiat world, we're trying to become people who can prevent extinction. This allows us to access our ethics. Their framework does not matter because their framework looks to ethics. However, our framework comes before ethics because our framework looks at what extinction is. Go on to, I guess, the rest of the framework. They're saying we're going to get more education through critical discourse. Extend what my partner said. We've been running Anthro for a long time. Like, the critique was invented in the 60s. Debaters have been running Anthro for a long time. We don't talk about space very much. That's one of the great things about parliamentary debate. We have one opportunity this entire tournament, and like this is my last opportunity in my parliamentary debate career, that I am going to be able to talk about space. The marginal educational value of talking about colonizing Mars is more important than like any of the very, very small marginal benefit of talking about anthropocentrism, because we've been talking about, as my partner said, we've been talking about anthropocentrism for a long time. Second, go on to the part where they said basically that if our ethics are flawed, you should vote against us. First, so
point of order. I brought this up in my first speech. Your partner had the chance to refute this, but he didn't. So
refute what?
Refute the fact that ethical inquiry is literally the most important thing. So any new discussion that he brings up should not be counted in today's debate.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. So. Yeah, no, we're talking about a response that came directly out of the block, which is that if you have flawed ethics, you should be directly voting against the affirmative. So, I am going to go on now. So basically, yeah, they're saying that if our ethics are flawed, you should vote against us. First of all, like the problem here is that the link here is that like bad people can make good decisions. Those things are like distinct from each other. So if they're saying that. Yeah, so if they're saying that like bad people always make bad decisions, they always make decisions that are bad for them, basically that's a problem because they never gave you a link here as to why it is that bad people always make bad decisions. You need to look at those as two discrete parts. Someone can be bad, but then they can also make like good decisions. So so basically, yeah, so there's no reason to believe that bad people will always make bad decisions. That's just like a catchphrase that they kept repeating, but they never gave you a link as to why it exists. Let's go on to fiat bad. Let's go on to fiat bad. Our entire lives are fiated. It's how we make decisions. That is our decision-making framework. It's how we look to things in our entire lives. We look to what is the world going to be like if I make this decision. Fiat is a good thing because
This idea about how we use fiat in our everyday lives was never brought up before.
Okay, well here's the thing. My partner did talk about responses to fiat and talk about how fiat is good, and so that is what I am doing also. But we didn't drop your point about fiat bad.
Like this specific, what I'm saying is like the specific idea about how fiat is used and incorporated in our everyday lives is new.
Okay, yeah, it's just new analysis on the same argument. Yeah, so you should prefer that like fiat does exist and that we should look to fiat in debate because it's more educational. It prepares us, even if we don't become policymakers, which yes, we probably not all four of us will become president in 2052, but you can still look to the fact that like fiat is how we make decisions in our entire lives, so that it's more educational that way. Go on to the perm. First, we can do both. So first perm is that we can do both. Like we can do the plan and we can reject anthropocentrism. This goes back to what I said about how bad people can make good decisions. Like you can accept that I'm a bad person, that's fine, but you still are going to want to vote for my plan. Like according to our role of that's the role of the ballot. Like you can concede that you think I am a bad person, but that doesn't matter because you're going to be looking at my plan. That's what you're going to be voting for. And so basically what we're saying here is that we can like accept that what we're doing is anthropocentric, and we can accept that that is a bad thing, but we can still do the plan. We can do both of those things. And so they're talking about how this is going to lead, and this is something that they did talk about in the block because the perm was an MG argument. So they're talking about how the perm is going to lead to like people making other bad decisions, but that's punishing us for something we didn't do. Like that's their argument says in the status quo we think anthropocentrically, but like that's punishing us for something that we didn't do because people are going to, according to them, be making those decisions either way. So it only matters at how we look at the plan. We can be anthropocentric and then like also look at, and then also, we can concede that we're anthropocentric and also do the plan because remember, you're not voting for us, you're voting for our policy. That's our role of the ballot. Go on to the second perm, which is do the alternative in all other instances. Basically, you need to extend what my partner said here. If anthro is so incredibly powerful, yeah, if their anthro-K is so incredibly powerful, we just do it in all other instances, except for the plan. But we all are still able to then garner our advantages from the plan, which is preventing extinction. They never explain to you like how their plan is actually going to prevent extinction. They said their solvency is going to prevent us from being anthropocentric, but they never, yeah, they basically dropped our fourth contention about extinction, which says extinction is coming anyway unless we do the plan. And that's something that you can consider to be absolutely true in this debate round. Okay. Let's go. Oh, okay. So let's go on to anthro. I asked in a POI in the 2NC. So like they're saying only anthro truly solves. Basically, here's the thing. Anthro includes humans. We're saying that extinction is going to happen, and that extinction like relates to everything. That means all the animals and the plants and the mollusks and the sea sponges are all going to die. According to the MIT study. So basically what happens here is if we can get more humans, like that is the highest priority, is that we can like keep people alive. We're going to be solving their anthro-links anyway. Humans are included under anthropocentrism. As long as they are alive, then the affirmative wins this round.
Nice job. Do you guys do handshakes or?